We are here today with Ambassador Luis CdeBaca from the Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons. So Ambassador CdeBaca, if we could begin with a few questions. I know this year marked the 10th edition of the annual Trafficking in Persons report. Could you tell us a little bit about what made this report so different from previous reports?
Well, one of the things that differentiates the 2010 report is the inclusion of the United States. It was very important to Secretary Clinton that the United States hold ourselves to the same standards that we apply to countries around the world. And this is a diagnostic tool. People who are trafficked in the United States deserve to have the same tool applied so that we can figure out what we need to do for our response to trafficking at home, just as we have that conversation with countries in other parts of the world.
And so what are some of the U.S. government's goals with regards to combating trafficking in persons, and how does the report work towards achieving those goals?
We're really looking to effectuate the UN protocol's 3P approach. This is something that the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 enshrined, and we were able to get that into the UN protocol as well that fall. What that does, the 3Ps, basically prevention, protection, and prosecution, calls for a multidisciplinary approach to trafficking. And that's really what we're looking at. Are the countries that are out there, do they have appropriate laws against trafficking? Are they using them? Is it not just prosecution but victim protection? Is there a way to prevent trafficking? All of that going towards what we hope is the ultimate eradication of slavery in the modern era.
And so what are some of the challenges that you have found working with the issue that the U.S. government has found?
I think one of the things that's challenging is that this is a concept that is very inconvenient for a lot of countries and a lot of actors. Businesses don't really want to confront the fact that there's slavery in their supply chains. The sex industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry around the world and isn't really interested in looking to see what the reality of the women who are in that industry actually is. People don't look at their own culpability, but would rather think that the traffickers are outside of society, operating on its margins. It's only, I think, when we have that cultural shift so that countries, governments, and consumers start looking at human trafficking as part of their issue that we'll see the big change.
And so on the other hand, what have you found to be some of the successful techniques or programs that governments have instituted around the world to combat trafficking in persons?
One of the most successful techniques seems to be a multidisciplinary task force model that would combine prosecutors, police, and social workers from the beginning and have that team go together throughout the case with the victim. So you have continuity of care, continuity of investigator throughout the entire prosecution. That model seems to be working, and in fact, even in countries that have a lot of law enforcement challenges like Nigeria, those countries that have adopted that kind of model are seeing real positive results.
And so, since we're in Spain, how have the U.S. and Spain worked together to combat trafficking in persons? And also, what have you found to be Spain's greatest achievements so far with respect to this issue?
Well, the partnership between the United States and Spain on so many issues is very strong, and we think getting stronger every day. One of the things that is exciting is the prospect of doing joint law enforcement work, whether it's here in Spain or in Latin America or other parts of the world as well. We'd like to see Spain develop into a model of anti-trafficking work based on the new law that just passed and will go into effect later in 2010. This new law actually provides for full coverage of the anti-slavery statutes to all victims, regardless of whether they're Spanish or foreign. And we think that's probably the biggest accomplishment that we've seen in Spain in years. It really brings them into compliance with the United Nations standards. And it's a very exciting opportunity, we think, for Spain.
Well, and now as a personal question to wrap up, if you don't mind, Ambassador, could you maybe describe how your previous career as a trafficking in persons prosecutor has helped you with this issue, and what perspective that gives you?
Well, I was a prosecutor in the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division for some years, and one of the things that I think is the hallmark of the American anti-trafficking fight is it's part of the criminal civil rights enforcement portfolio. So the big three parts of that portfolio are racial and ethnic violence, the fight against police brutality, and the fight against slavery. And it has been since the 1930s when the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division was founded. I think one of the things that allows us to do is the things that we learn about vulnerable populations when we're working on hate crimes, for instance, is transferable to the fight against slavery. The things that we learn about how to penetrate an almost impenetrable culture of the thin blue line of law enforcement, where police officers tend to not want to testify against each other, even if they know that another police officer did something wrong. Being able to work against anti-corruption and being able to work against police brutality lends a lot of perspectives that is directly relevant to the fight against trafficking. And I think that human rights, that civil rights model of the United States brings a fresh perspective for us in this fight. The other thing it does is it makes us focus on the victims. And so when I look at these anti-trafficking policies, when I look at countries around the world, what I'm really seeing is the experiences of the victims who I know personally, people who I've seen make the move from frightened victim to empowered survivor over the years. Some of those people now have citizenship in the United States because our victim protections have a pathway to eventual citizenship. And that's what we think should happen everywhere, that the opportunity for those people who've suffered so much to become real contributing members of society. So I think that's some of the things that fuel my perspective when I look at this, and hopefully serve as a model for other countries as they look at how they can put together an anti-trafficking response.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you.